Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into the final NFL playoff clinching scenarios, the full 2023 playoff picture, and also taking a look at the draft. We do have the Chicago Bears guaranteeing they will be drafting number one overall. Going to be an interesting decision for them. But when it comes to the playoff picture, we're going to first take a look at the AFC. And we did have the Baltimore Ravens. What a performance against Miami. They clinched the number one overall seed. They will receive a first round bye, the only team in the AFC to receive a bye. You do have the Dolphins sitting at 11-5. Still at the number 2 seed, still the leaders in the AFC East, but they need to beat Buffalo. Right now, they're sitting 3-point underdogs in that game at home due to all of their injuries. It'd be crazy if the Bills came all the way back and won this division for a fourth straight year. But the Dolphins, they are going to be at home. We'll see. This is the Sunday night game, the final game of the NFL regular season. The Dolphins sitting as a 2 seed, although they could drop back to as low as possibly a 5 or maybe even a 6 seed, depending on if they lose. They already have clinched a playoff berth, so that's not an issue. But if they lose, let's say the Bills beat them, the Browns also win, they could drop back theoretically to a 6 seed. They would face the Chiefs. It would be Dolphins-Chiefs in round 1 of the playoffs. You have the Chiefs sitting at 10-6. They've clinched the AFC West, and they're locked into the number 3 seed. So there is no possible movement there. You would expect the Chiefs to rest some of their players. They are, that was a very easy division this year, the AFC West. Normally it's better than this, but they're the 3 seed. The Jaguars sitting at 9-7. They own the head-to-head tiebreaker over the Colts and the Texans in the AFC South. So right now the Jaguars, they're in a win and in scenario, and they do have a very winnable game at Tennessee. Although it is on the road, we will see. But right now, Jacksonville, all they have to do is win and in. They are the fourth and final division team because the AFC South is bad. They have the worst record out of all the teams. The Browns are locked into the number 5 seed. So no matter what happens in Week 18 against Cincinnati, it doesn't matter. That's why Cincinnati is coming in as 4-point favorites against the Browns. The Browns very likely will take on either the Texans or the Jaguars, however that shakes out, but more than likely the Jaguars. If they do win, they will travel there. You do have the Bills as the 6th seed. If they beat the Dolphins, they're going to shoot all the way up, possibly to a number 2 or number 3 seed because they would win the division. The Colts as the number 7 seed at 9-7. They have the huge game against the Houston Texans. Also the Texans sitting at 9-7. This is the Saturday night game, so the NFL has 2 Saturday games, 2 Sunday games. The Steelers are also part of the Saturday game. I believe they're the 4 o'clock game. And this is important to say when it comes to Houston and Indianapolis. They both hold the head-to-head tiebreaker over Pittsburgh because they both beat them. Pittsburgh has a very small chance to make the playoffs. That's why they're playing on Saturday. But overall, this is how I would expect it to shape out. You could possibly see Buffalo move to the 2 seed if they beat Miami on the road. You could possibly see Houston move to the 7 seed if they beat Indianapolis on the road, and then you would get a Buffalo versus Houston matchup. Pittsburgh, I don't think has much of a chance, but right now it's come down to these 9 teams for 7 spots total. I think Indy ends up losing to Houston, and I think Buffalo beats Miami. Those are the 2 big things that could potentially happen, and those would be your 7 teams. Now for the Steelers, because they don't hold any of the head-to-heads against the AFC South teams, they need Buffalo to lose to Miami, and they also have to beat Baltimore, which doesn't seem all that improbable considering, even though they are going on the road, the Steelers got extremely lucky with when they're facing Baltimore. Baltimore, a really good team, obviously 13-3, one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the NFL, but they're very likely going to be resting everyone. The Steelers sitting 3.5 point favorites on the road because Baltimore will likely be resting their starter. So if the Steelers win and also Buffalo, who's only 3-point favorites, loses on the road to Miami, Pittsburgh will get in the AFC. Now moving on to the NFC. You do have San Francisco locked into that number 1 overall seed. They have the first round bye. They're 10-1 in conference, 5-0 in division. They will take on the Rams. That's a pretty meaningless game considering the Rams are locked into a wild card spot themselves. Dallas, they should be the number 2 seed, but they have to beat Washington. They're going to be 13-point favorites in that game. Washington is tanking at this point. They're trying to get a top 3 overall pick, possibly going to be drafting a quarterback. I would expect Dallas to be the number 2 seed, win their division. It's winning in because Philadelphia had that terrible loss at home to Arizona where they blew the big lead. You do have Detroit sitting at the number 3 seed. They are virtually entrenched to that 3 seed. I guess theoretically if Dallas loses, and Philadelphia would also have to lose, I would think for Detroit to move to a 2 seed. So Detroit very likely will be a 3 seed. They are facing Minnesota. You do have Tampa Bay, even after the loss to New Orleans, holding the tiebreaker at 8-8. They need to beat Carolina on the road. You know, you would expect them to, but who knows? It's the NFL. Tampa Bay isn't this world-beating team. If they beat Carolina, they're the 4 seed at 9-8. You do also concede New Orleans and Atlanta possibly in the mix there. Those teams will face each other. I would expect New Orleans to beat Atlanta. If New Orleans beats Atlanta and Carolina somehow beats Tampa Bay, you do have New Orleans slotting into the number 4 overall seed in the NFC. Philadelphia is entrenched right now as the 5 seed. They need Dallas to lose, and they would also have to beat the Giants on the road to really move up and win that division. I don't think that's going to happen. The Rams are entrenched with a playoff spot, and you do have Green Bay after crushing Minnesota last night, holding the tiebreaker over Seattle right now, the final spot in the playoffs. We will see what happens in terms of Seattle and Green Bay. Also, you could say Minnesota possibly with an outside chance, but sitting at 7-9, especially on the road at Detroit, it's looking very unlikely in terms of that. So I would say the top 3 seeds, well, you could argue the top 4 seeds depending on your, how bad you think Carolina is. Like, could Tampa Bay actually lose to Carolina? But I would expect San Francisco's already locked into the 1. Dallas is 14-point favorites. They should win. Detroit is very likely going to be the 3. And then on top of that, you would have Tampa Bay, or you would figure New Orleans as the 4 seed, Philadelphia entrenched as the 5 seed, and then the Rams as the 6 seed, unless maybe they lose and get bumped down if Green Bay or Seattle hold the head-to-head tiebreaker over them, and then they possibly win and move up. But Green Bay, you would think, would beat Chicago, although Chicago's pretty good. Seattle on the road at Arizona, that's also a very winnable game. It should come down to the end. And then taking a look at the ever-important draft position, where we're looking right now, you do have the Bears locking in the number 1 overall pick because Carolina sitting at 2-14. Their teams are 2 games behind them, so they've locked into that number 1 spot. How about Washington, 4-12? That strength of schedule is going to be interesting. You can see the strength of schedule with with 3 teams: Washington, New England, and Arizona. I guess Arizona has a way better strength of schedule, so there's no way if those teams end the season all at 4-13, Arizona would pass the other 2. But Washington and New England, because think about this, Washington faces Dallas. That's going to bump up their strength of schedule. You would think that could possibly move Washington to number 3, even if they both lose. New England, they had that win a few weeks ago against the Broncos. That really hurt them in terms of draft position. But right now, Washington sitting at number 2, New England 3, Arizona 4. The Giants, they've got to be very happy, 5-11, but they're number 5 right now. They've lost 3 games in a row. The Chargers have catapulted to number 6 in terms of the draft. Maybe with some luck, they could move all the way up to number 5 or number 4, but they would need some of those teams to win. You do have Tennessee sitting at number 7, the Jets at 8, Atlanta, who still has a chance to make the playoffs at 9, and then Chicago again at number 10. So Chicago's won some games, but it really hasn't hurt them because they own that Carolina pick. So right now, Chicago would be picking 1st and 10th. There's 2 different things they could do. They could either just draft Caleb Williams, trade Justin Fields, or they could trade down a few spots, draft Marvin Harrison Jr., keep Justin Fields, get more assets, and then draft probably an offensive tackle with the 10th overall pick. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. And then just taking a look at a mock draft, you can see Williams going number 1 overall to the Bears. You do have May at number 2 to the Commanders, and Jaden Daniels, the Heisman winner, going number 3. I do think Daniels is going to go very high in this draft. He may even go above May. It'll depend, but right now I think the consensus is Williams 1, May 2, Daniels 3, and then Marvin Harrison Jr. That's kind of an obvious decision if you are the Cardinals and you want to keep Kyler Murray, give him a superstar receiver, 2 offensive tackles going 5 and 6 to the Giants and the Chargers, and then you do have Malik Neighbors going to Tennessee, possibly pair him with Will Levis, Brock Bowers going number 8 to the Jets, with them possibly returning Aaron Rodgers next year. It'll be very interesting, but certainly it comes down to the decision that the Bears are going to be making before the draft. Will they stick with Justin Fields? His contract is not great because if he has a breakout season next year, you're going to owe him a ton of money. Or do you want that rookie contract with Caleb Williams? Justin Fields does have a very bad career record. It's not all his fault, but they're at the point where do they really pass on another number 1 overall quarterback? We will see. Either way, guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you're following me on X. Link to that's always in the description.